once everyone's got the internet, some person who did nothing but put a basket on her head and trudge to the market can find customers, can do electronic payments, can get information, can hire her neighbors. So in Africa, I was at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona in February. Huawei had a whole sort of half a football field of telecom company representatives from the global south. And I spoke to all of them. And there are Africans there saying, well, we've got to deal with Huawei. They give us all the location and payment information of smartphones, and they give us an AI algorithm. So that allows us to give microcredits to people because we know how much cash flow they have, and we know that they're actually going to the market. We can use the geolocation. So this transformative effect in the global south is what gives China power. If you look at the opinion polls, everyone in the global north hates the Chinese. I don't like them much myself. But, 70, 80, 90% majorities, China's bad. You go to the global south, it's flipped around. Big majorities like the Chinese because in Indonesia or Brazil or South Africa or Nigeria, or Ghana, the experience people have with what the Chinese have brought to them is extremely positive. Not because the Chinese are altruists, it's because to make money in places that were already occupied by the nasty local oligarchs, they had to actually add some value, whether they liked it or not. So the influence of China among billions of people is enormous. And we in the United States have tended to look at these places as baggage. They're foreign aid places. We have to make room for them in Washington at the hotels once a year for the IMF and World Bank meetings, and in New York for the UN meetings, but we don't take them seriously. The Chinese take them seriously. And the biggest challenge to American influence in the world long term is China's ability to integrate billions of marginalized people into the world economy. We're talking about people going from making $2 a day, which is misery and degradation, to $10 or $15 a day, which is the beginning of dignity. And that is something we've really dropped the ball on. We were doing almost nothing in that area. We've ignored it. I've written any number of articles complaining about this. I went to Mike Gallagher and said, please, let's offer an alternative to what the Chinese are doing. But so far, I haven't seen much response, and that worries me.
So the shiny object that American commentators will often fixate on in a environment like that BRICS summit is that there will be a new global reserve currency created out of a coalition of nations like that. Do you think that that is a present concern, or is that a red herring for understanding what's actually going on? It's
not a present concern because the credit markets, the capital markets of those countries are too corrupt, opaque, and inefficient and illiquid to support a reserve currency. You try to do trade financing in a local currency anywhere in the world. I'm a banker, remember. You'll tear your hair out. You can pick up your smartphone app and send money to anybody in dollars anywhere in the world. There would be an enormous amount of work would have to be done to make trade financing and reserve financing efficient in local currencies. However, two things have happened in the past 2 years, two really big events which affect this. One is the Ukraine war and the sanctions, and the second is the coordinated tightening of monetary policy by Western central banks. The old adage is when the industrial countries get a cold, the developing world gets a flu. They're back of the line for credit. If credit gets tighter, things are tough for them. The Chinese have become very important lenders to the developing world, which has buffered many countries against what otherwise would be the effect of a coordinated credit squeeze. It's also the case that because of sanctions against Russia and other people, it's worthwhile to incur the higher transaction costs and other annoyances of dealing in local currency. So that's given a huge push forward to the technology, to the banking relationships, and so forth. So yes, there is a challenge to the dollar in the long term. It's not a short-term issue because those markets do backward, but we have seen for the first time that it's possible for this to happen in the future. And if we want the United States to be the dominant economic power and the dollar to be the dominant currency, the most important single thing is to make investments in the United States more attractive than other places. And that means improving our economy.
Some of what underlies these debates in Washington, which is a view that China is an imperial force across the world in a sort of conventional military sense. I mean, the way that people talk here in DC, you would not only assume that the Million Man Swim is coming to the coast of California, but that, there will be a Chinese imperial presence across the world. I mean, what do people get wrong about what Chinese ambitions actually are?
China has never had the same kind of imperial approach that we or the Russians have had. Its approach has been much more one of establishing suzerainty. They're the dominant power. People pay tribute to them. People acknowledge their primacy, but govern their own affairs. The Chinese have never been particularly interested in governing other people. China's role in the world is much more powerful than we give them credit for. Look at the BRICS summit last month. Saudi Arabia, Iran, and a bunch of countries are joining the BRICS group, which is really a China-centered group. China's the dominant economy in there. Brazil and Russia are massive importers of Chinese technology. If you just take one parameter, which China really dominates, which is mobile broadband, that's Huawei and ZTE. In the global south, they're the biggest providers. This is having a transformative effect on what Donald Trump, with some justification, called countries. I did development economics, for some years, as I mentioned, with Polyeconomics and elsewhere. And what you find in the whole countries is that you have rotten local oligarchs who control the local businesses, and you have about half the people who are off the tax rolls and in the so-called informal economy. And the local oligarchs treat them like beasts of burden. Nothing ever happens. Nothing ever gets done. And the Chinese come in, and they don't have any claim on the local monopolies. They have to do something different that'll make money. So they build broadband. And with broadband, they bring in e-commerce and e-financing and all the other, what they like to call the ecosystem that goes around broadband. And what we observe, I'm running a study of this for Journal of American Affairs, which will be out in a few weeks. Once you get 60% or so of the population using the internet, you see an explosion of business formation.